credit debt of the United States, that we can expect a downgrade, and we can expect a further downgrade in cities and counties all over the country. And somehow we're supposed to believe that this is a good plan. What this plan does, I asked him if I had 3 additional minutes.
I yield the gentleman 2 additional minutes.
The gentleman is recognized for an additional 2 minutes.
What this plan does is hold the jobs of America's families and working people all across this country. It holds them hostage. It holds them hostage to the passage of this legislation. It holds them hostage 90 days from now. This bill says, if you don't vote for the Ryan budget, because we know the votes are on the other side of the aisle to pass the Ryan budget, then we go back to putting the credit of the United States at risk. The last time the American people looked at the Ryan budget, they rejected it overwhelmingly. Do you remember the election of November? Just a couple of months ago, they rejected those cuts in Medicare, those cuts in Medicaid, the tax cuts for the wealthy. And yet all of this is being put back on the table by holding the debt limit hostage, holding the credit hostage, holding American jobs hostage. So if you don't vote for that budget, then they get to play with the debt limit again. They get to play with the debt limit again. We got big lifts to make between now and then, folks. We have sequestration. We have tax reform. We have a budget to write. Let's just get down to the business and do it. Just do it. Don't play with the credit of this country. Don't play with people's pension plans. Don't play with the interest rates that corporations have to pay to borrow. Don't play with the interest rates that your local municipalities have to borrow for projects in their district. This has got to stop. If you really believe that America is a great country, if you really believe that we're an international power, then we ought to start acting like one, and the Congress of the United States ought to start acting like it. And 90-day extensions on the creditworthiness of the United States is not the picture you paint when you're an international power. And it has to stop. It has to stop. We cannot continue to go through this and put all of this at risk and put this recovery that is in fact happening at risk because
I yield them an additional 1 minute.
The gentleman is recognized for an additional 1 minute.
Because of the actions of the majority here in this House to once again fool with the credit. You want to shut down the government? Have at it. I was here when it happened before. You'll find all your constituents up close and personal. You'll get to know them. That's a lot different. That's a lot different action. You want to go off with sequestration? You don't like the cuts that come up with in substitute? Fine. We voted for sequestration. You told the American people with your votes you were prepared to have sequestration if we didn't do the job. So you got a lot of tough votes to make. Don't try to avoid them by holding the creditworthiness of the United States at risk. It has got to stop, and it should stop today on the floor of the House of Representatives. We should say to the world, we are prepared to have this country pay the bills, the debts that have been incurred by our actions. It's got to stop today with a no vote against this legislation.
From Texas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As always, this floor is open to people who have ideas. I'd like to say to the American people and to my colleagues that are listening that the Republican leadership has decided to bring this bill to the floor today. We have no clue exactly what date the United States actually needs to make sure that we pass this bill to avoid not paying our bills. Secretary of the Treasury is in active notification with our leadership and the leadership of the Senate, and perhaps all members because of his openness to speak about this in the press. We don't know when that day is. Because we don't know when that day is, that's a good reason to begin working on ideas to see whether we can even pass this bill. I think we're going to. I think it's going to be a bipartisan bill. I don't think everybody necessarily has the same concerns that the gentleman from California spoke of, but what we're trying to do is work together. Conservative Republicans in our party do support this bill. I support this bill as a conservative Republican, Our Speaker is a conservative Republican, supports this bill. But what it's about is avoiding the problems of chaos, avoiding the problems of doing things at the last minute, avoiding the problems of not addressing the issue, avoiding the problems where the marketplace loses confidence in what we're doing. Chairman Paul Ryan, chairman of our Budget Committee, bright young leader for our country, forthrightly brought this idea to our conference, has sold it. It's the right thing to do. We are trying to do here today the right thing, talking with the American people, letting people see that we're moving forward to avoid conflict and avoid problems. So it was accomplished with this five-page bill. Five-page bill which we will then have two committee chairmen, Paul Ryan representing the Ways and Means Committee, perhaps Dave Camp, the chairman of the committee, and Candace Miller from House Administrator, work through meticulous, thoughtful ideas that really are not difficult to get because it's a five-page bill. We think we're doing the right thing. We think we got the votes. We think it's going to provide this country and the Senate and this administration, us all working together, the right thing. So, if you want to oppose it, I get that. I can understand the positions held, but passing the bill will be a positive thing. It will offer working together relationships with the Senate. It is supported and not opposed by the President, and I think gives us an opportunity to put a good foot forward in this new Congress rather than one where we're fighting and disagreeing and can't get our act together. The American people demand that we get things done. The American people are asking, hey, when possible, can you guys work together? Yes, we can. Today is a day where we can say, Mr. Speaker, people from Nebraska, people from Texas, people from Ohio, people from all over this country, can you work together? We're trying to find a way. And I'm proud of that. And with great respect to anybody who would disagree with that, we're going to stand behind our product today with a money-back guarantee. A money-back guarantee. If we don't get our job done, we're not going to take the pay. I reserve my time.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I give myself 30 seconds.
Gentleman is recognized for 30 seconds.
Let's be clear, this House is not open to new ideas. If it was, we would not be coming to the floor with a bill that is a completely closed rule, so that members cannot offer their ideas in the form of amendments. Secondly, their gimmick even has a gimmick to it. They say that if the Senate doesn't act or the House doesn't act on a budget, they don't get paid. Really what they do is they get paid at the end of the year. So their pay is not taken away. This is show business. And instead of show business and instead of gimmicks, we ought to be coming to the House floor in a bipartisan way, trying to figure out how to solve some of these budgetary problems. I regret very much that this is the best we could do, kicking the can down the road for 3 months. Mr. Speaker, at this point, I'd like to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from California, Mr. Barra.
For 1 minute.
We are on a tight sheet. We can't go over it.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to address Congress's failure to pass a responsible budget. As an original co-sponsor of H.R. 310, the standalone and original No Budget, No Pay Act, I am pleased to see the 113th Congress begin to address our core obligation to pass a responsible budget that not only honors the promises that we have made to our parents and grandparents, but also secures a prosperous future for our children and grandchildren. We can do this, but we must do so in a bipartisan way. The great Speaker of the House, the Honorable Tip O'Neill, was able to work with President Ronald Reagan to revamp our tax code and strengthen Social Security. The Honorable Speaker, Newt Gingrich, was able to work with President Bill Clinton to not only balance our budget, but to create a budget surplus. We can do this, but we must do so in a bipartisan fashion, taking the best ideas from both sides of the aisle, finding common ground, and moving forward. Thank you. I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We'll reserve our time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Mass.
2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson-Lee.
Gentlelady is recognized for 2 minutes.
Speaker, I ask to address the House, revise and extend and ask unanimous
Hearing no
consent.
objection, so ordered.
I thank the gentleman very much from Massachusetts. I thank my friend from Texas. I would hope that all of us would commit to doing our job. And I know that my good friend recognizes that the Constitution in Article 1, Section 8 requires the Congress to have the power to collect taxes and duties and to pay the debts, but also to be concerned about the general welfare. Really what the administration says is that they support a long-term increase in the debt ceiling, and the reason why the people of the United States have not heard of this controversy is because the normal course of business constitutionally is for the Congress to consult with the Treasury to consult with the Congress. The debt ceiling is raised in a manner that protects the general welfare of the American people. But now we have a proposal that is driven by polling and brinksmanship. This is not the way to run a country. I heard a comedian some years ago say, what a great country, and we are a great country. I love America, and the Constitution emphasizes the greatness of this nation. But we don't play politics with something that is the ordinary course of business. Spending cuts is a responsible way to govern, but it is to govern in a way that we sit at the table of reconciliation and we don't break the backs of seniors who utilize Medicare and Social Security and veterans benefits. What we do is we sit at the table and we understand how to deal with the oncoming issue of the deficit. And how do we do that? We do it with growth. But the Constitution has nothing in here that suggests under this article that we are to do brinksmanship and do 2 weeks or 3 weeks or to May. What happens in May? A crisis where we can't pay our military? The debt ceiling is paying the debts. And I am troubled by the fact that we would use this tactic. I want bipartisanship. In fact, someone who raises issues about the vulnerable like myself have worked with my Republican friends. I look forward to do it. I'm an American. I believe in the Constitution, but you do not raise the debt ceiling in increments. The administration says we won't stop it, but we want a long-term increase so that we can begin to discuss the building of this nation. Growth, the Constitution, that's what we should be talking about, making America better. I yield back my time.
Time has expired. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the gentlewoman from Texas, Houston, Texas, is absolutely correct. We do need long-term growth of our economy. We need jobs. We need job creation. We need to be able to reduce the debt of this country. The President is well aware, we're well aware here in Congress, that each of the years that the President has been our President, he increased spending. He wants a massive tax increase, and we have a deficit. We have a deficit of $1.3 trillion each of these years. We're trying to work together. We're trying to, as the President said as he addressed a luncheon the day, just an hour after he was sworn in, that he wants to learn from some of the things that he's done, and he wants to do better. Some of doing that better is a chance to perhaps reassess. Did I do the right thing the first time? Did I do the right thing when I continue to raise taxes and demand that we do that? Higher taxes diminish jobs and opportunity and growth in this country. And that's why we're trying to suggest openly, Mr. President, let's grow some jobs. Let's do the things I think that are more in line with what President George W. Bush did, referred to as number 43 in Texas, Dallas, Texas. Number 43 had 60 straight months of economic growth. 60 straight months of economic growth with the underpinning of reducing taxes so that Americans would go and work harder and see the incentive for creating jobs and would want to buy into the philosophy that the harder that we work, our country benefits. The underpinnings of Social Security, of Medicare, of Medicaid, systems that are very important to our country, reducing the number of people who have to receive government assistance is what happens when you have job growth. Protecting the long-term interest of this country and growing the American dream. The gentlewoman from Houston is absolutely correct. And the methodology towards getting there is not higher taxes, it is not higher spending, it is giving more freedom and opportunity. It is having a reduced size of the government, not a bigger government. It is giving people an opportunity to have fewer rules and regulations, not more rules and regulations. So the process that the Republican Party believes in deeply is the rights of individuals, freedom and opportunity, and reducing the size of government gives more people opportunities to empower their freedom and opportunity for their American dream. It's part of what we're doing here today. I think we believe it, and I think it works. Look at Texas, and you will see where we have job growth, job creation, a healthier economy than other places in the country, and an opportunity to say we want more of it for all of America. Mr. Speaker, I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, how much time do I have remaining?
Gentleman has 2 minutes remaining.
I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New Jersey.
6 for the gentleman from Texas.
I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Andrews.
I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, so ordered. Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I doubt very much that anyone in America is sitting around today saying, you know, I hope Congress sets up another fiscal cliff. I hope they put us in a position again where no one knows what's going to happen the next couple of months. We ought to listen, but that's what we're doing with this bill. And we should listen to the President, who said this: unfortunately, Congress consistently brings the government to the edge of default before facing its responsibility. This brinksmanship threatens the holders of government bonds, those who rely on Social Security and veterans benefits. Interest rates would skyrocket, instability would occur in financial markets, and the federal deficit would soar. The United States has a special responsibility to itself and to the world to meet its obligations. We should listen to this President. Ronald Reagan said this in 1986. In 1986, the Congress listened to him, extended the debt ceiling, and acted responsibly. So should we. This legislation sets up another fiscal cliff, another financial nightmare, another problem for the American people that we should avoid. I urge all members to vote no.
Gentleman from Massachusetts has 1 minute left. The gentleman from Texas reserve.
Thank you. I reserve my time and have no additional speakers.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of the time.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, we have a gimmick before us that withholds pay if we don't pass a budget, but not if you don't get a deal. It doesn't matter whether the budget is irreconcilable or partisan. And here's the other gimmick. It really doesn't withhold anybody's pay. It just delays when you get the check. The problem is not the United States Senate, I want to tell my friends. It is my friends on the other side of the aisle who do not want a deal, who want instead to basically annihilate and eviscerate the public sector. If you want to balance the budget, I'd say to my friends, I will tell you, pay for your wars, pay for your tax cuts, pay for your giveaways to the very wealthy in this country. What is before us is not a solution. I would urge my colleagues to vote no, to not kick the can down the road, to deal with the problems as we see them right now. And I would also urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, those especially who call for transparency, vote no on this closed rule. This is a closed rule. Nobody has an opportunity to offer any other ideas. This is not the way we should be dealing with budget issues. Vote no on this closed rule. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Texas is now recognized.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, and I appreciate my colleagues, the gentleman, Mr. McGovern, the ranking member of the committee, Mrs. Slaughter, and those Democrat members who came down to express themselves. I also appreciate the Republicans that came down to talk about this important issue. Mr. Speaker, what we're doing is we're debating a bill, H.R. 325, that ensures that we will make sure that the obligations of the United States are taken care of. We're not trying to stand in the way. Even the United States Senate Majority Leader has said, great job, House. Thank you very much. We can work with this bill. We can work with you. Members of my party have said, we think this is a responsible way to begin the process to avoid having to make difficult decisions at the very end. It's laid out a process. Yesterday, the gentleman from Wisconsin, our young leader Paul Ryan, chairman of the House Budget Committee, was asked in testimony, will you produce your end of the bargain that is in here? Will you take care of your part with the knowledge that we're counting on that? The Senate has said they think they're part of the bargain. Whether they pass this bill or not, they can step up to the responsibility. Those leaders have said, yes, we think we can. That's not perfect. By golly, I'm not sure what perfect is anymore, because perfect may not get passed in this House, but the fair and proper way to handle things where the American people have confidence in what we're doing, the markets have confidence in what we're doing, the budget is handled, all these things are placed in a systematic order of an understanding so that our members, the members of this body, can go home and communicate with people. Here's what we think is going to happen next. Avoiding problems is what Speaker Boehner and our great majority leader, Eric Cantor, are trying to do. They are bringing legislation to this floor that adequately begins the process before we get in trouble. 5-page bill, ordered up exactly as the doctor would have wanted, in English where you can understand it, where it doesn't take a legal degree or for you to have to be in the House for 30 years to figure out what we're trying to say. What we're trying to say is right here, and that is if the House and the Senate work together, we do a budget, we lay out to the American people what we're trying to do, we work with the President, we tell this administration and the government what we're doing, the American people can have confidence in this. I support this. So, in fact, as Chairman of the Rules Committee, I am asking for our members and all members of this body to please see this as a responsible way to deal with the problems that are immediately in front of us, but before it becomes a crisis, before it becomes something that we cannot deal with as effectively, and bringing the American people. I also want to thank the President of the United States, President Obama, because President Obama said he could live with this. I want to congratulate Senator Harry Reid, Senate Majority Leader. Yeah, I'll say that here on the floor, because he says it's the right thing to do, and thank you for passing us a clean bill that will give them the authority and the responsibility to do what they really want to do. Not playing hardball, not throwing rocks. As a matter of fact, Senator Harry Reid said, clean bill, good thing. Now it's up to them. It's up to them to take up their activities that are for us, and it's up to this House of Representatives. So, as we finish this, the young leader of the Ways and Means Committee, Dave Camp, Paul Ryan, and others will be here debating these ideas. Immediately after that, you will see where Candace Miller, the House Administration Chairman, will come and talk with this House and the American people about the responsibility that she has to ensure that what we do is correct and proper. And then this body will have a chance to vote yes or no. And then that will be an authority and responsibility once again continue for Paul Ryan as the chairman of our Budget Committee and those members of the committee, Republicans and Democrats, to go to their work and get it done, produce a bill, and we will then comply. But if we don't, no work, no pay. That's something the American people can understand. It's simple, goes back to 1607. No work, no food. Well, members of Congress need to understand we got to get our job done. So I'm proud of what we're doing here today. I can stand behind this product and proudly say I think this will pass not just the smell test of the American people, but something that they can understand, something which they will look forward to, and watch us as we do our job. I yield back the balance of my time, and I move the previous question on the resolution.
Inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
State is inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, isn't it true that no matter what happens with this bill, that members will get paid no matter what?
I cannot respond to that.
Thank you.
It's not an inquiry. Question is the question is on ordering the previous question on the resolution. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, on that, I request the yeas and nays.
Gentlemen request the yeas and nays. The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 8 and Clause 9 of Rule 20, this 15-minute vote on ordering the previous question will be followed by 5-minute votes on adoption of the House Resolution 39 if ordered and approval of the Journal if ordered.
The first of 3 roll call votes in the House this morning. Members debating legislation extending the nation's debt ceiling for another 3 months. This first vote is a procedural vote. It'll be a 15-minute vote. That'll be followed by a vote on the rule itself, calling for an hour of debate, and then a possible vote on the Journal to follow. Assuming the rule is approved, we'll move on to general debate and votes after this series of votes. A few minutes ago, we talked about the debt ceiling debate with a Capitol Hill reporter covering the issue. Talk about the debt ceiling debate is Peter Schroeder, staff writer for The Hill. How would this debt ceiling debate bill actually work?
Well, the proposal put forward by House Republicans, it actually would suspend the debt ceiling for a period of about 3 months until May 19th. Typically, the borrowing limit now is at $16.4 trillion, and typically Congress addresses this by just adding another amount on top of it. But what we're seeing here is a slightly different approach where the Republican proposal would actually suspend the debt limit for that period of time, and then on May 19th it would automatically increase it to cover whatever borrowing the Treasury Department had to do during that time frame.
And why have House Republicans chosen this route to address the issue?
Well, there's a couple of factors at play. One is political. For example, by voting under this arrangement, members aren't actually have to vote for any particular increase, so they don't have to go home and potentially hear campaign ads about having to vote for a $1 trillion increase or some other large number like that. And then also, in terms of logistics, this allows for them to, what Republicans are wanting to do is they want to continue this fiscal debate going forward. So, in a sense, by suspending the debt limit and then having it be automatically increased later, that kind of allows them to continue this debate going forward as opposed to just having a regular hike, which some people would argue could put the issue to bed.
Is this approach likely to satisfy more conservative members of the Republican conference who oppose raising the debt ceiling without accompanying spending cuts?
Well, we have heard from some members that they certainly would have liked to have seen a proposal put forward similar to what House Speaker Boehner previously advocated on the debt limit, where any increase to the debt limit would come with an equal amount of spending cuts. Clearly, under this proposal, there are no spending cuts attached to it, so it doesn't really meet that standard. What we're hearing from conservative members is some of them are, saying they would prefer to see that other approach, but we're not seeing kind of this large outcry among the conservative bloc of the Republican caucus that would really suggest that the vote could be in danger. Now, obviously, we still have to see how the vote goes forward, but so far there are members who seem to basically understand what the leadership is trying to accomplish with this.
How about House Democrats? Will they support this measure? Will they vote for it?
That still remains to be seen, actually. House Democrats in leadership, they've offered plenty of critiques of the bill. Steny Hoyer yesterday said the bill wasn't really a serious measure, was worthy of disdain, but at the same time he hasn't said how Democrats are going to handle it, whether or not they're going to whip their members and try to garner opposition to it, or whether they're just going to allow their members to vote as they see fit on the bill. I mean, there's not really a whole lot in the bill that Democrats theoretically would be opposed to. It increases the debt limit, although not for a very long time, and it doesn't include any sort of major spending cuts that Republicans previously were pushing hard on this, so there's not a whole lot there that Democrats may potentially find a whole lot offensive.
There are also provisions in the bill dealing with suspending lawmakers' pay if they don't approve a budget plan for the year. Can you explain that for us?
Sure. The Republican leadership is billing this bill as a no-budget, no-pay bill, and the way it works, there's a separate provision in the bill that stipulates that if either chamber of Congress fails to pass a budget by April 15th, members will have their pay withheld until they actually get together and putting together a budget. This is an attempt to put pressure on Senate Democrats to actually get a budget put together. They haven't done one in the last couple of years, and Republicans have repeatedly made that a point of contention. So now this is an attempt to say if there's no budget in place, members aren't going to be paid. And it's worth noting that members aren't not going to get their paychecks, that pay will be withheld, and that's an attempt by GOP leadership to make sure that the bill doesn't run afoul of the 27th Amendment, which states that basically members can't adjust their pay while in session. The changes they make, whether it's a pay cut or whether it's a pay raise, can only take effect in the new Congress. So this is an attempt to kind of work around that. Members will get their money sooner or later, whether or not they pass a budget, but this is just an attempt to kind of put pressure on bringing a budget forward on time.
How about the Senate? What's the Senate likely to do with this legislation?
Well, what we're hearing from Senate Democrats and Republicans, it seems like the bill would probably be going forward in the Senate. We haven't heard explicitly from Democratic leadership, Majority Leader Reid, whether or not they'll be bringing that forward. But yesterday he was asked about it, and he offered some fairly kind words about it, said it was a welcome step forward. Democrats say that they're happy that Republicans aren't using the debt limit as kind of a major piece of brinksmanship going forward. And then also, obviously, the White House came forward yesterday and said that they would not oppose the bill either. So that seems to have put forward a path that you can see this bill advancing without any sort of major opposition.
Peter Schroeder writes for The Hill. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
And again, the House voting on a procedural motion right now pertaining to the rules for debating the debt ceiling extension, extending it for another 3 months. General speeches and votes on final passage expected early this afternoon. You should also know that Senate Democrat leaders are also weighing in on the debt ceiling issue today. Majority Leader Reid and Senators Durbin, Schumer, and Murray will be holding a briefing on the issue at 11:30 this morning. Again, votes underway in the House on a procedural motion pertaining to the rules for debating the debt ceiling extension. While this vote is underway, on Capitol Hill today, Secretary of State Clinton is testifying on the attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi that resulted in the deaths of 4 Americans, including Ambassador Christopher Stevens. This morning, she is a witness before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. This afternoon at about 2, she'll be answering questions before the House Foreign Affairs Committee. We're covering that testimony. Both of those hearings are on our companion network, C-SPAN 3. We will give you a look at this right now.
While we were gathering information, maybe it was because the IC was still looking at all of their sources and having different threads coming in. But, you know, as the ARB said, even today, the motivations, the actions before they went onto the compound, all of that is still not nailed down. So I think we were trying very hard to provide information. Maybe one of the lessons learned here is, you know, just withhold. Don't say what you don't know for sure until it's finally decided. But that's not part of who we are as Americans and as public officials. We get out there, we say, here's what we think happened, it's subject to change. And so I think we all wish that nobody had ever in any way raise doubts, but certainly Ambassador Rice and all the other administration officials were speaking off of what had been determined were the most acceptable talking points.
Well, I think we know now that talking points, we don't exactly know where they were changed or how they were changed, but they were changed or altered, and I think that we can all concede that we were not given a clear picture of what went on.
Well, but Senator, and you know, we didn't have a clear picture. I wish I could sit here today and tell you that within days, within a week, by September 20th, when we came up here, we had a clear picture. We did not have a clear picture. And that, you know, if you wish to fault the administration, it is that we didn't have a clear picture, and we probably didn't do as clear a job explaining that we did not have a clear picture until days later, creating what I think are legitimate questions. You know, I understand, I've been on the other side of the table. I understand trying to figure out what was going on and why were we told this, that, and the other. But I can only assure you that as the information came to light and as people thought it was reliable, we shared it, but that took some time.
Right. Thank you. In the remaining seconds left, you mentioned that many of the recommendations have now been put in place. There are protocols in place to make sure that if security is not adequate, that we move our diplomats and others to places where they're more secure or whatever. But let me just say, there were protocols in place before this. There were tripwires that we tripped. And the actions that were outlined to be taken were not taken. How can we be assured here that the new protocols that are in place with these new recommendations being implemented will be followed or adhered to? Because they clearly weren't before.
Well, Senator, I want to make clear that no one in the State Department, the intelligence community, any other agency ever recommended that we close Benghazi. We were clear-eyed about the threats and the dangers as they were developing in eastern Libya and in Benghazi. But there was no decision made and nothing that prompted such a decision. Now, sitting here today, we have probably at least 20 other posts that are under a serious threat environment as I speak to you. We are working with the other agencies in our government, some of whom are co-located with us, others of whom are nearby. We're constantly assessing. And sometimes we get it wrong, but it's rare that we get it wrong. This was one of those terrible, tragic times when, you know, there was an assessment shared by the ambassador, shared by others, that turned out not to take into account the militants attacking that night. So I can tell you there are, as you say, tripwires, but what we're going to try to do is elevate the discussion and the decision-making so that there's not any doubt that everybody's on the same page, that we're not missing information, we're not husbanding resources and thereby making less than optimal decisions. That's what we're going to try to institutionalize going forward.
Thank you.
Senator Coons.
I want to thank Senator Menendez for chairing this critically important hearing and to thank you, Secretary Clinton, for testifying today. We deeply regretted you were unable to appear before due to your illness, and I'm thrilled to see you've made a full recovery. I want to start by just thanking you for your remarkable leadership as Secretary of State. One of many stops in the million miles that you've traveled in the 112 countries you visited was a stop we shared jointly on a trip to Liberia for the second inauguration of Ellen Sirleaf Johnson. And it gave me an opportunity as a freshman senator to see up close your remarkable skills and stamina and your determination. In my view, your leadership has helped restore America's credibility, build bridges with our international partners, and you've also built bridges here on the Hill, where your leadership at State is respected on both sides of the aisle and has been widely praised. While your likely successor, Senator Kerry, has my full confidence you will be deeply missed. You said in your opening statement you're determined to leave the State Department and our country safer, stronger, and more secure, and in my view, because of your leadership, they are. Today we continue the consideration of the recommendations of the Advisory Review Board, which found that security was, quote, grossly inadequate to deal with the attack that took place in Benghazi in September. The mistakes that were made are simply unacceptable, and I'm pleased that the State Department has begun to promptly implement the Board's recommendations thanks to your leadership. I know you agree that the massive security failures, such as those witnessed in Benghazi that cost the lives of 4 brave Americans, simply cannot happen again. And I look forward to working with my colleagues on this committee in a searching review of the resources needed and the State Department structure to ensure that we do better to protect our diplomats and other Americans who put their lives at risk each and every day. As chairman of the Africa Subcommittee, I'm particularly pleased that you have drawn for this committee today in your testimony the links between this tragic incident in Benghazi, the recent terrorist incident in Algeria, and the unfolding challenges in Mali. I chaired a hearing on Mali on December 5th, and have been impressed with your engaged leadership visits to Algeria, sort of raising the alarm about AQIM. And I welcome your testimony today on how you see the regional threats from AQIM, how you see the consequences of this recent incident in Algeria, and what role you think there is for the United States in both supporting the current actions by the French and the Malian military and the need for our ongoing insurance investment to restore democracy in Mali, to restore development and some positive prospects moving forward for the people of Mali, and how you think we can ensure that state and defense are coordinating through AFRICOM in West and North Africa going forward.
Well, Senator, I appreciate greatly your sustained attention to Africa, and I think it's going to be viewed as quite prophetic because there will be, I believe, a continuing set of challenges. You mentioned some of them, but by no means we've got Boko Haram in Nigeria posing the threat of instability to one of the most important oil-producing nations in the world, something very important to our country. We've got other unrest and challenges coming down the west coast of Africa, but we also have a success story, at least a hoped-for beginning success story in Somalia. And what did the United States do there? You know, when I became Secretary of State, I recommitted American money to the AMISOM forces. We worked to train the Ugandans and the Burundis and others. We worked with the Kenyans when they went in. We worked with the Djiboutis. It took time. There were no shortcuts, but we had literally the boots of our American soldiers and the boots of American diplomats on the ground. I visited one of the training camps in Uganda. And what we have to do is recognize we're in for a long-term struggle here. And that means we've got to pay attention to places that historically we have not chosen to or had to. So I would hope that this committee can make that case to the rest of the Congress. We're now looking at, troops coming from other neighboring African countries. We can't just send them into Mali. They don't have training to do that. We're going to have to work with other partners to train them and equip them and then to sustain them, just like we did with the troops in Somalia. So, 4 years ago, al-Shabaab was one of the biggest threats not only to East Africa but to the United States. We have a chance to really continue on a positive track there, but it didn't happen by accident. It took American money, American know-how, American experience, and we have to make the decision we're going to do the same in North Africa as well.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I certainly look forward to continuing to get your advice, direction, and encouragement as I try to work with my colleagues here to ensure the same sort of success going forward in West Africa that we've recently enjoyed in East Africa. Thank you for your testimony.
Senator McCain. Thank you, Madam Secretary, and it's wonderful to see you in good health and as combative as ever. We thank you. We thank you for your outstanding and dedicated service to this nation, and we are proud of you. All over the world where I travel, you are viewed with admiration and respect. 4 months, or months after the Benghazi tragedy, it's a tragedy when we lose 4 brave Americans, There are many questions that are unanswered, and the answers, frankly, that you've given this morning are not satisfactory to me. Were you and the President made aware of the classified cable from Chris Stevens said that the United States consulate in Benghazi could not survive a sustained assault? Numerous warnings, including personally to me, about the security were unanswered or unaddressed. It took a CNN reporter looking through the consulate to find Chris Stevens' last warning. When were you made aware of that cable? When were you made aware of the attack on the British ambassador and the assassination attempts and the closing of the consulates there? And what actions were taken? What was the President's activities during that 7-hour period? On the anniversary of the worst attack in American history, September 11th, we didn't have Department of Defense forces available for 7 hours. 2 brave Americans died in the last hour. With all these warnings, all these things took place, we didn't have a single Department of Defense asset apparently available to come to these rescues. I categorically reject your answer to Senator Johnson about, well, we didn't ask these survivors who were flown to Ramstein the next day that this was not a spontaneous demonstration. To say that it's because an investigation was going on, the American people deserve to know answers, and they certainly don't deserve false answers. And the answers that were given the American people on September 15th by the Ambassador of the United Nations were false. In fact, contradicted by the classified information which was kept out of the Secretary of the United Nations report, who, by the way, in the President's words, had nothing to do with Benghazi, which questions why she was sent out to start with. Why is it that the administration still refuses to provide the full text of emails regarding the deletion of references to al-Qaeda and terrorism in the talking points? Why do we care? Because if the classified information had been included, it gives an entirely different version of events to the American people. You're going to the American people and tell them what happened, then you ought to have your facts straight, including, the ambassador said, quote, al-Qaeda is decimated and our consulates and embassies are secure. So here we are, 4 months later, and we still don't have the basic information. Now, if you want to go out and tell the American people what happened, you should at least have interviewed the people who were there, instead of saying, no, we couldn't talk to them because an FBI investigation was going on. And by the way, as I said at the time, I just happened to be on one of those talk shows, people don't bring RPGs and mortars to spontaneous demonstrations. That's a fundamental. And of course, the President continued to say, days afterwards, September the 12th, he made a reference to act of terror. September 12th on 60 Minutes, too early to know. September 20th on Univision, we're still doing an investigation. September 24th on The View, we're still doing an investigation. The President of the United States, as late as September 24th, 2 weeks later, did not acknowledge that this was an act of terror conducted by people who were at least somehow connected to the al-Qaeda. And finally, Madam Secretary, I strongly disagree with your depiction of what we did after Gaddafi fell. We did not provide the security that was needed. We did not help them with border security. We did not give them the kind of assistance that would have been necessary to help dismantle these militias that still, to this day, remain a challenge to democracy in Libya and freedom. You knew Chris Stevens very well. I knew him very well. I knew him on July 7th when I went to Libya to observe the elections. And at that time, on July 7th, he expressed to me his deep and grave concerns about security, particularly in Benghazi. And he continued to communicate with the State Department, and I don't know who else was privy to those cables, of his deep concern about the security there and the need for additional assistance. And I will argue with facts that after that event took place, after the fall of Gaddafi, the, quote, soft footprint was partially, to some degree, responsible for the tragedy that took place. The American people and the families of these 4 brave Americans still have not gotten the answers that they deserve. I hope that they will get them.
Well, Senator, I understand your very, very strong feelings. You knew Chris. You were a friend of Chris. You were one of the staunchest supporters of the efforts to dislodge Gaddafi and try to give the Libyan people a chance. And we just have a disagreement. We have a disagreement about what did happen and when it happened with respect to explaining the sequence of events. We did get to talk to the DS agents when they got back to this country. We did so. It was not before September 15th. We had no access to the surveillance cameras for weeks, which helped to answer a number of questions. But with respect to helping the Libyans, and that also goes to the question Senator Rubio asked, we will provide a list of everything we were doing and we're attempting to do, but I will also tell you that since March 2011, congressional holds have been placed on programs for many months for aid to Libya. We've had frequent congressional complaints. Why are we doing anything for Libya? It's a wealthy country. It has oil. Disagreement from some sources that we should never have been part of any UN mission in Libya. Currently, the House has holds on bilateral security assistance, on other kinds of support for anti-terrorism assistance. So we got to get our act together between the administration and the Congress. If this is a priority and if we are serious about trying to help this government stand up security and deal with what is a very dangerous environment from east to west, then we have to work together. So I hope that we can have the kind of discussion where we can agree on certain approaches that will make a difference. Again, I would urge that you look and read both the classified and unclassified versions of the ARB that tries to deal with the very questions that you and Senator Johnson are raising, the timing of it and the like.
On this vote, the yeas are 232. The nays are 193. The previous question is ordered. The question is on adoption of the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts rise?
On that, I ask for the recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
And we have the House now voting on the second of 3 votes in this series, voting now on the rule for debate, the rule calling for an hour of debate. And after that, we expect a vote on the journal. Both of these 5-minute votes. General debate expected to get underway shortly after this series finishes up. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton continuing her testimony this morning on the attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi that happened last September 11th. She's appearing before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. We are carrying it live right now on our companion network, C-SPAN 3. And then this afternoon at about 2, she'll be answering questions before the House Foreign Affairs Committee. That will also be live on C-SPAN 3. The Associated Press has this story by Donna Casata from the testimony this morning from Hillary Clinton. Secretary of State Clinton told Congress this morning she's committed to improving security at U.S. diplomatic missions worldwide after the September 11th raid on the U.S. diplomatic mission in Libya. Clinton, in probably her last appearance on Capitol Hill as Secretary of State, says she is determined to leave the department and the country safer, stronger, and more secure. She told the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that no one is more committed to getting this right. Tomorrow, her possible replacement, Secretary of State nominee Senator John Kerry, will go before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. That's the committee he chairs. C-SPAN and C-SPAN Radio will have live coverage beginning at 10 Eastern.
Gabriel Georgia voted aye.
Vote. The ayes are 234. The nays are 190. Without the motion, resolution is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the question on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the Journal, which the Chair will put de novo. The question is on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the Journal. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. For what purpose the gentleman from Utah rise?
I ask for the ayes and nays.